DCarsonCPA, MFC in the Lines is a simple local model of governance and financials designed to cover municipalities and localities, villages, and things like that. It's a microcosm of the government. It's a takeaway from the DCarsonCPA lines on global financial decision-making research, which drill down to national, state, local, and on this level, the very local level of municipalities and regional government, villages, and things like that. As we look at these lines, we think about the constituents who are the community. Originally, some sort of article of governance was formed, probably an incorporation or some legal, some measure of legal range and scope of government that would be established to establish a town leader or a mayor, to establish a town council or town legislature, to establish potentially a judicial branch, and then to have the various services that would be under that government and how it would work. So typically what happens is you had a community banded together, so we have some needs which would best be supported by a government rather than arbitrarily Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones deciding what was applicable to everyone else. They wanted some representative government where the collective ideas of everyone could come together and project within a framework to the common need. So you have an exchange, and at that point they decided they've got to fund it somehow. So there's typically an ongoing exchange of value being dollars and a return of services from the executive branch, the executive, legislative, and judicial branch of any village or municipality. As we look at the lines, we know that the community lines have continual ongoing lines of involvement. That's with voting, with initiatives and ballots, and basically trying to update on a regular basis what's going on and delegating to representative authorities at the various levels. The officials you have will be elected to a certain degree, some will be appointed, and then basically you'll have some people that will be working on a continual basis for the government. Depending on how big it is, how many people are in the town, what the size of the budget is, that could change and vary. But in a generic model, that's what's happening. We come into this and we map to this point from a line of economic, statistical, legal research, which is the laws and rules of structure of government, the MPA lines, which are embedded in that, the financials, the technology, the societal lines of research, which in this case we're also going to talk about human capital here, and the X factor, societal value. One of the first things we figured out when we were looking at the larger model of the economy and financials was that you have to always remember on the government lines is an X factor of societal value. So as much as you might want to work with financials purely to solve problems, you're always going to have an X factor societal value. And that value is when a law, rule, or some sort of ordinance is passed to protect a village, to keep the water clean for safe and healthy drinking, which would reduce the cancer and mortality tables, or to set a traffic limit, or to put up speed lights where it's dangerous. That's protecting individuals, or to educate children. That's protecting or adding some community value. It's an X factor. Intangible value, you may not be able to measure that societal benefit, but you could measure the way in which you allocate resources to needs. So the correct way to deal with the government models at any level is to think about what are the priorities we've established, what are the goals, rank them, and then think about what are the adequacy of the ways that we pipeline our resources to needs. In other words, are we dealing with the most efficient ways to cover the needs that we have? And if you're doing that, or at least studying on a consistent basis, you're in a process of continual improvement and engineering that can always add value to some town or municipality, and a line of continuing ability to work with the funds that are available to meet needs. And of course everyone has a challenge here and there where you need to stretch funds, so it's good to know for these lines here how you can be more efficient, find greater pathways. Some that's working with technology, some with statistical optimization, and the use of financials as a tool to get to where you're going. Now, if I've not mentioned it already, community lines have ongoing lines of responsibility. They delegated authority. The authority went over here, and those representatives who are elected are here to do their job and help make sure and balance to the needs of the community, that they're finding ways to help industry, to work with nonprofits, and NGOs are not really that much relevant in the village line, except that NGOs have a heck of a lot of knowledge and study about the ways that localities do their business. So they have some global best practices, and there's some excellence and knowledge there. As well, the nonprofit centers have groups that deal with the village and municipalities in different functional levels, and they are also a source of excellence and knowledge. But in capacity of a village and community, most likely the nonprofit they're dealing with, they may have the luck and good fortune to have someone who's studying government in their community that they can draw on as an advisor. But more likely they're going to have someone who's dealing with nonprofit sports, nonprofit religion, nonprofit, different various needs that are in community is the most likely thing in a town or village. But it's not impossible. You might have someone in your village as a nonprofit studying the government. And if you are, you've got a center of good knowledge that can probably help you figure out some more things. And they probably leaned on by leadership here and there. They're probably already well aware that there's someone there that is able to support in that way. Now, if you think about the industry lines, there's a couple things that happen. Basically you're dealing with a couple of needs from government. Government will cover the lines. They have tax policy, which deals with real estate, services, and potentially income taxation to fund the government. Then they have health and human services for the young, the old, the weak, the infirm, people that can go around and help people potentially depending on the size. And then they have some lines of pensions, because if you have people working in the government, there's probably pension lines for that town government. And you've got governance and codes, which is, what are the rules going to be about how we have a lake? Do you need a fishing license for that lake? The roads, how quick do we want people to travel? Are they commercial, non-commercial, environmental protection? How do we deal with that? And then lines of, trade, commerce, and education. All sorts of needs that a bigger government exist. Same way in a smaller government. It just depends whether they're funded or not, based on the size and the population and the willingness of a population and affluence of a population to fund their government and provide all services. So that funding will always be some significant measure of the quality and quantity of ongoing services. So if you have weak funding, you'll have weak services potentially, and there's a lot of dynamics like that. There could be a whole nother structure. We talked about this model. We used to take about 10 minutes to go through these things. We pared it down to 8 on this presentation. I think we've cut ourselves short by 2 minutes, but we're going to try to give it a quick run. The lines over here where local government can help its constituents here is on economic development, on jobs, on the lines of opportunities and efficiencies. To a certain degree, any local government does that, and maybe on jobs, they might not be the job providers, but maybe they have a very good library that's got good knowledge about how people in the community can find jobs and work in nearby towns or cities. And so there's an infrastructure here which kind of is scalable, if you will. It depends on the needs of the community. And there may also be lines where the town policy will be business favorable or disfavorable for industry, depending upon if it's an affluent community, wants a bedroom community, not so much of a business district beyond downtown, they'll zone a district to a place, or they'll say don't bring commercial trucks in our community. The laws and rules that are established here can influence pro-business or non-pro-business elements. Non-profits exist probably for sports clubs, your soccer clubs, certain heritage groups, maybe certain educational and scholarship funds. You never know what it would be, but there's probably industry, non-profits, government, and individual family community lines, community groups, and things of that nature. And we got 30 seconds to talk about this real quick. There's the fiscal lines of any government, and for the town and local lines, it's about taxation as the funding arm. It's about expenditures, which are appropriations, debt services, and interest costs. That means if you have a deficit in the year, government went out to the market, put out some bonds, and they're probably paying down some bonds and paying off some interest, which increases the cost structure. Last in on the lines, the sustainable equation is tax revenues equals expenditures plus debt service plus interest expense equals your surplus